Hey there, this is Pat Ennis of Ennis Legacy Partners. Welcome to the Exit Readiness Podcast. I'm here with my co-host Walter Dial, tax partner Gelman, Rosenberg, and Friedman, CPAs, located here in Bethesda, Maryland. Our mission here on the Exit Readiness Podcast is to provide you, the business owner, with subject matter expertise on topics pertaining to building transferable business value and for planning your eventual exit from the business. One thing that we absolutely know is that at some point you're going to exit the business. There's no doubt about it. Either your business is going to be owned eventually by someone else or it's eventually going to die. And we want to help you build sellable value and then plan to exit successfully and on your own terms and conditions. So, Walter, I know you're a little under the weather here this morning, my friend, but I'm going to get you involved here nonetheless. What comes to mind when you hear the term crowdfunding?
I think what comes to mind right off the bat is crowdfunding as a source of funding for small businesses that don't have access to capital markets. So I think of it as kind of a grassroots way for someone who's got a great idea or a very small company and they just need some funding to get started. It's a way for them to actually get that funding.
Yeah, well, in the work that we do in helping owners exit successfully, right at the center of the planning is a focus on building a business that's sellable. And of course, that includes growth of revenue and profitability. And it's not infrequent, and in certain situations, that growth needs to take place through acquisition of other companies versus internal or organic growth. A lot of times it makes sense to acquire other companies. And so today, we're going to learn more about how crowdfunding can actually be used by a small business owner as a source of financing, as Walter said a second ago, to finance business growth. And so the topic today is using crowdfunding to grow your business. And our guest is Lorette Farris, founder of iBOSS, Inc. While on Wall Street, Lorette assisted business owners in raising millions of dollars. She has over 20 years of experience in the financial services industry, served at the executive level in investment banking, M&A. She's an M&A specialist, principal of a business brokerage firm. Her unique background qualifies her to assist business owners in their startup through exit strategy planning and execution. With capital being the main ingredient needed every step of the way, she's mastered this new capital market, if you will, somewhat created by the Jobs Act of 2012, which levels the playing field for businesses to take control of funding resources in a disruptive fashion to what she would say, a disruptive fashion to old norms. So good morning, Lorette. It's of course, great to have you here with us. We're looking forward to this. Walter and I, the businesses that we work with are typically up to $25 million in revenue. And so we're really interested in learning more about crowdfunding. Neither one of us is, or certainly we're not experts in crowdfunding. And we want to know if indeed this is a viable alternative for financing the businesses that we're working with as they look to expand and grow. And you are the perfect person to help us better understand that. So how are you today? Thanks for joining us.
So thank you so much, Pat and Walter, for having me. Walter got it down. He understands crowdfunding, so I think he can help to explain how that works. Thank you, Walter. I was listening to what your thoughts on for what crowdfunding is. So I look forward to answering any questions that I can to assist in the space that you guys are working in.
Well, fantastic. Hey, let's begin then with, Lorette, a description, your description of what crowdfunding is, particularly as it pertains to, these businesses that we're working with, 25 million in revenue under. And if you're seeing businesses that size use crowdfunding as how you're going to describe it here in a second or two for a source of funds for expansion.
Yeah, so again, thank you. And even when I think about when I did mergers and acquisition work, even business brokerage, Back then, the what is now crowdfunding didn't exist because of the way that the securities rules and regulations were set up. So yes, crowdfunding is, I love using this long title, it's the democratization of raising of capital, right? So the security rules and regulations that have now changed are those that allow entrepreneurs and companies to raise capital via securities in the private markets in the way that they used to not be able to do, because of mainly the provision of general solicitation. It used to be that for a company that wanted to raise capital, if they didn't have a database of high net worth individuals, then they really didn't have anyone to reach out to raise that capital. Well, when the Jobs Act of 2012 came about and it made provisions for marketing to individuals, whether they were accredited or non-accredited, it really just changed the way that companies can reach out for capital. And so while the bulk of these regulations, the thought was about early stage and startup companies, right? But the provisions are the exact same things existing businesses can utilize. And existing businesses, those that you guys work with that's in the up to $25 million range, they're actually in a better position, because when you say crowdfunding, that means you have to reach out to a crowd, right? Well, those existing businesses, they have more of a crowd between their clients and customers and just the people that they've dealt with over the years. And so not only do they have that for potential investors, they have ongoing operations. They can prove what they've done and how they've done it. Unlike an early stage or startup company that might be talking about their concept of generating revenue, existing businesses are showing historical data. Now, the issue that an existing business will run into as it relates to investors are, if you're looking to raise capital, what new widget are you bringing to the table that's going to support the capital you want to raise and how that translates into a return for that investor. But if that's the only thing an existing business have to deal with, think about your early stage startup companies. They have to deal with how do you convey to an investor being able to make a return, but also proving that your idea to even generate revenue is reasonable. So I know I said a lot there. I'll take a breath for a moment.
Yeah, let me ask one follow-up question to that, Lorette. I guess this is a big question in my mind. If you've got a company and let's say it's somewhere between 10, 25 million in revenue, and they have access to the traditional, ways of raising money, capital markets and so on and so forth, bank, why would they consider crowdfunding versus one of those more traditional and conventional ways of raising capital?
Okay, so let's step back to answer that question. You have a lot of existing businesses that do need capital, and they may be tapped out with their line of credit, or the bank is just not willing to go back to the well for them, right? That's where a lot of your alternative lending has come from, with factoring and purchase order financing and things of that nature. So just add crowdfunding to that list of options, right? But even when we say crowdfunding, if we look into what that really is, for instance, for an existing business, it's just a private placement. It's a Reg D, private placement that they want to raise $5 million. All crowdfunding is doing is giving them an option to reach out to raise that money directly themselves, as opposed to going through a financial institution in order to raise that capital for them. And again, the difference that has happened, though some other things are changing a little bit, there was a time that a investment banking firm, any kind of financial institution on the private equity side, was not interested in helping a company raise capital if they weren't looking to raise, that minimum of $20 million. So an existing business that could be in that $5 to $25 million range that wants to raise another $5 million, previously, you didn't even find a firm that might have been willing to do that. Well, today, you don't have to have a firm willing to do it because you can do it directly yourself. So there were reasons that existing businesses might want to raise private equity capital. Crowdfunding is just a process that they can utilize to do that because the rules and regulations now make it effective for them to walk down that path. And now they're raising that private equity capital a bit cheaper than they would if they had to utilize the services of a financial firm.
So, Lorette, I'm assuming a lot of this is done via the internet. Are there any security issues for either the company raising capital or for the crowd investor themselves?
So, yeah, when we talk about the pure sense of crowdfunding, yes, is basically all done online, right? Because crowdfunding is a regulation within itself, and it's called Reg CF, or Regulation Crowdfunding. So if you want to utilize the provisions that Reg CF provides, and under Reg CF, you can raise a maximum of $1,070,000, right? But you could do that annually. So every 12 months, you can raise $1,070,000 under Reg CF. But yes, that is all done online. Those provisions are that if you want to use these regulations, you have to use a regulated crowdfunding portal in order to execute that transaction. But again, if we look at the raising of private equity capital strictly from the standpoint of it being a private placement, you do not have to use, and the private placement, you are not limited on how much capital you can raise, right? If you're going after raising capital using a private placement, but you're just using the process of crowdfunding, which is putting on a marketing campaign and directly going at soliciting investments yourself, then no, it does not have to all be online, right? Because now you're going after whether you're using a direct mail list, whether you're just calling on people that are in your database or anything in between. You do not have to do it strictly online. So it really does depend on how you're looking to bring that capital in.
So, Lorette, then is there any way to be effective raising capital through crowdfunding if you don't have an existing network?
Absolutely. Because again, that power of crowdfunding allows you to do any form of marketing and advertising yourself, right? And let me be mindful when I say any form, because these are securities. So there are security rules and regulations. You do want to be mindful of anything that you're doing in your marketing and advertising should be factual. Don't push an informational out there that we are the best sliced bread you'll ever come across in the world. You got to put your information out there that we're one of the, best bread companies. So you do have to be mindful in what you're saying, but you get to build your network. You can start with what business cards do you have for people that you think could be interested, and go all the way through who am I connected with on LinkedIn and on Facebook and on Twitter in order to start building what I call an organic database of potential investors. And the coolest thing about building your database, because even when you're doing that and you start marketing, that's how you're pulling new people into your funnel, right? But the biggest thing I could say to anyone, if you want to use the process of crowdfunding to build out your network is with any company, the first time you go to raise capital, that's the most difficult time you're going to have because you're just starting up and getting ready. But think about that company that knows next year there's another $1 million that you're going to need for this other process. And 2 years from now, there's more capital you'll need to bring in. Well, the beautiful thing is once you start building that database of potential investors, each time you need to go back to the well to raise more capital, you're starting with a seasoned database. You continue to try to add potential candidates, but you start with one. So yes, you can start with nothing. There's a process to build it out, to get people interested, to educate folks on what you're doing. And next thing you know, all of a sudden you have your own database that as you need capital for the long term, you have some of the right resources to reach out to.
That makes sense. So, Lorette, what does a budget look like to effectively raise capital through crowdfunding?
Yeah, so budgets come in all shapes and sizes, right? It does depend on which regulation you're going to use, for what professionals you may need or not need. The two professionals that I would generally always tell someone to consider, of course, is a securities attorney and a CPA that understands securities rules and regulations, because there's financial accounting you want to make sure of, and there are just some legalities that you want to make sure that you don't shortchange yourself on. So when you're talking about a budget, number one, you have to keep those in mind. Now, in this crowdfunding space, a lot of the fees of professionals are starting to go down because of the volume of work that's now starting to happen in that space. But the other biggest part of your budget is your marketing. Marketing and advertising can be expensive depending upon what you're doing and using, but it can be very effective. If the bulk of your marketing and your marketing budget is by using online means, then your budget is going to be a little lower than if you incorporate direct mail. But in reaching out for potential investors, you will find that direct mail, which a lot of people don't think about, but direct mail is very effective when you're raising capital, because that's the only kind of marketing you can specifically design to hit a targeted audience. You can get a list that's down to, in this zip code, which homes do we want this information to go into because they have a income level that makes sense for what we're trying to do. So your budget is going to be based on the professionals you have to use. Your biggest line item is more than likely going to be your marketing. And then outside of that is if you're using a platform, the platform will have a fee versus if you're going direct, there's no additional fee. I would say that anyone probably needs to budget anywhere from, say, 5 to 18% of the capital that they're looking to raise as they're trying to figure out what it could cost them.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thanks. Let me ask you another kind of a little bit off the wall question. So if I own stock in IBM, I can't pick up the phone and call the CEO and say, hey, how's my investment doing today?
Right.
Does a crowd investor have access to people like that or not really?
So the sheer nature of most of these businesses are going to be on the smaller side. Could they potentially get to the owners, the founders, or whatever? Sure. And when you're small, sometimes you want to have a little more of a closer relationship with your investors than the big boys do, right? But the short version is this still goes back to it depends on what type of raise that you do. If you're doing a crowdfunded raise where the minimum investment is $250, then you're probably going to have enough investors that your founders have set up sort of an investment relations division, that if you want to call to speak to someone directly, you're going to get someone in that division. Versus if you do a private placement, a $5 million private placement, and you have 5 investors that's investing $1 million each, you're probably going to have direct lines to them. So it still is going to depend on the type of raise that you're doing. I recommend for any client I work with that they absolutely have some type of investor relations division, because you want to have a good relationship with those early stage investors. But everyone should be cautioned that just because you invested $1,000 in a business, it does not give you direct access to the owners, and you own a percentage of the company on a pro rata basis, that if your ownership isn't in that 20-30% range, then more than likely you're not going to have those direct conversations.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Lorette, we can have a conversation with a business owner, and within not just a few minutes, we can have a feel for how sellable their business is going to be.
Right.
I'm sure you can have a conversation with someone, and in a few minutes you can know whether or not crowdfunding is even a viable alternative for them. Give us some of those parameters.
Okay. So yeah, to that point, when people hear that I work with companies to help them raise capital, everyone wants capital, right? But it's a matter of trying to figure out what's the right capital for you. And I do work with people to help assess just that. Like you said, that as they start talking about not only what they're doing, but where they're looking to go. That's going to help me immediately assess if what they're saying, if their vision positions them to more so be a lifestyle business or a legacy business or a business that's really positioned for high growth. If you want to get into crowdfunding, or more specifically raising private equity capital, then your business model and your revenue model needs to be designed to make sense for an investor. If there's not enough revenue in your business model that's going to be generated, that's going to pay a reasonable return to an investor, then investment probably is not going to be well suited. And then it's a matter of then talking about, well, maybe debt capital is the way to go. And then you got to sort of figure out, well, are you going in the direction that you're going to be able to support debt? And you keep going down the line that way. So absolutely, it is easy enough to assess if a revenue model or business model is going to make sense to try to go after investment capital, or do you start looking at alternative measures to get to the capital that you need? It doesn't make sense for anyone to spend time or money to chase investors if you don't have an investable business or business model.
Okay, so Lorette, as we wrap up here today, can you, in the last few minutes, is there any last words of wisdom or even recommendations for next steps if someone out there who's listening thinking, you know what, this could be the solution to my problem in raising capital? Any last words of wisdom, any next steps that you would recommend?
So yeah, I would clearly say make sure you take a pulse of it's not just the money you need that you want to figure out if you jump into this. You have to take a pulse of who you are, the company climate and culture, and then where you're really looking to go with the business. And upon making those because a lot of times, people want money, but they're not thinking about the fact that you are sharing ownership in the business, again, if you go that equity route, right? Or if you don't and you go the debt route, what requirements are going to be placed on the company that you can or cannot live with? So I would clearly recommend that anyone considering walking down outside the path of bringing in outside capital, you take a pulse of what do you really want? Where do you go? And what is your risk tolerance? Are you ready to share ownership? That, you sit in a board meeting and the decision goes contrary to something you want to do. How are you going to feel about that? And once someone can assess that, I get how I have to run and operate. And again, for the businesses you guys work with, they are more used to having those sort of tough discussions and meetings than those early stage startup companies that feel this is my business and I'll do everything I want to do. So my main word of wisdom is really take the pulse. If you're looking to raise capital through outside resources, make sure you understand what comes with that, what kind of answers you have to be able to give people, and what kind of control you might be willing to have to share or forego in order to bring in that outside capital.
Very good. So yeah, we would say to listeners, if you're thinking about expansion and or acquisition, any kind of growth strategy that's going to require additional capital, then it would be wise, it seems, to at least investigate and analyze whether or not crowdfunding is going to be a legitimate and viable source of capital for you. And Lorette, I know you have process for this. I know that you have a process to help folks determine whether or not it's going to be the right solution for them. If listeners want to reach out to you, Lorette, and contact you and talk to you more about this, how would they do that?
So I'd actually recommend, I got a lot of information. I have 2 websites that I'd recommend they go to. iBOSS Inc., IBOSSINC. One website is .net and the other website is .com. I have one that's set up that gives a lot of these different talks. I do shows and all the rest of that. And if someone then wants more information, there is a button they can click to leave a message or send a voicemail or send up a smoke signal. And the other one, .com, I actually wanted to take a lot of this stuff out of my head and put it on paper that actually talks entrepreneurs through this process of utilizing crowdfunding to raise capital. So either site gives a plethora of information and tools that people can make assessments from, and it's easy enough to get to me from either one of those sites if they then want some further information, conversation, or just a free consult.
Very good. Thanks, Lorette, so much. This has been extremely helpful, I know, to anyone who's listening. It's a relevant topic for owners who want to build sellable value and grow, and it's often a misunderstood and a lot of ignorance around crowdfunding as it pertains to expansion and growing your business. So thanks so much, you fantastic guest, as we knew you would be. We really appreciate it. Listeners, you know how to reach out to Lorette at this point. And if you want to reach either Walter or myself regarding building the value of your business or planning your exit, you can reach Walter at 301-951-9090, or you can reach me at 301-859-0860. Check out exitreadiness.com for an online planning course, and consider attending our Exit Readiness Base Camp on August 28th at the Learn Center in Rockville, Maryland. The Base Camp is a one-day workshop, and we focus on building sellable business value in the morning sessions. And then in the afternoon, we look at some personal exit planning issues that that every owner needs to consider. So the Exit Readiness Base Camp, August 28th at the Learn Center in Rockville. and then our online planning course, exitreadiness.com. You can get more information on all of this on the base camp at nslp.com or exitreadiness.com. And until next time on the Exit Readiness Podcast, this is Pat Ennis and Walter Dial signing off.